Welcome back to the New Bridge Radio Show on WLTKDB Let's Talk. I am your host, Kevin Mackey, and we are connecting you to what's next in your life. And we're here to remind you that you are important to this world, and we sure are glad to have you along on this episode of the New Bridge Radio Show. Don't forget, you can catch us live on our station website. Just head on over to www.wltkdb.com and you can watch the show live there. Or if you prefer, you can also catch us live on YouTube as well as Facebook Live. All you got to do is just click the search bar on either of those platforms and type in WLTKDB, and you'll find our station pages on both those platforms. And you can join the chat and you can ask questions of our guests on either Facebook Live or YouTube. If you would like to get in touch with the New Bridge Radio Show, you can certainly email us. And we love hearing from you. We love knowing what you like about the show. And we even like knowing what you don't like about the show. And we love hearing from people who have learned or found out how to connect with what was next in their life. So if you would like to be a guest, just let us know. You can email us at thenewbridgeradioshow@gmail.com. Now, tonight on the New Bridge Radio Show, we're fortunate to have fellow Washingtonian on the show. He is author Peter Harrett. He is a first-time novelist. And Peter was born and raised in Oregon and has spent the majority of his adult life here in Washington State, where he lives with his family. He credits his interest in language and writing to his grandfather, Peter James Bennett, a prolific poet who is both a mentor and role model and continues to shape Peter's life and character to this day. His first book and newest book is called The Rings of Hessarian, Book 1, and it's Peter's first novel, and it's going to be a trilogy. And it doesn't look like we have Peter yet, or he hasn't logged in yet. So we're just going to go on and we'll talk a little bit about Peter's book because it is interesting. The Peter's book is a science fiction book. And I got to admit, when I first read the title, I was like, I don't know about this. This might be something kind of corny. You know how science fiction books sometimes have these complex stories and you can't follow because the characters have such complex names. You're like, wait, who was that? Who was that? Wait, where'd this guy come from? So, you know how you kind of run into that kind of trouble when you come into a science fiction novel. This one wasn't like that. And when I first got it, I was kind of dreading it. I was like, I don't want to read this book. But I got started and started reading the book, and within the first 20 pages, I was kind of intrigued, and so I started going forward with the book. I'm like, wow, wait a minute. And for all of you people who are science fiction fans and that know a lot about science fiction, you may know in Star Trek, there's something called temporal mechanics. And temporal mechanics in Star Trek always means they're about to play with the timeline somehow. They're going to zing the ship around the sun, and all of a sudden they're going to be back in time. Temporal mechanics. And temporal mechanics, if you're a huge fan of Star Trek Voyager with Captain Janeway was a huge show just a few years ago. And Captain Janeway would always say temporal mechanics was her least favorite thing in the universe to deal with. But it is weird how that show kind of ended with temporal mechanics. But anyway, this is a book about temporal mechanics. And it's complex. The protagonist in this story is a woman by the name of Valerie Dunne, Dunne. And she is an unusual person and a time traveler. And basically the gist of the story is she the Earth is facing an invasion of a superior species, and she is trying to save the day. She is going back in time to hide herself from being destroyed by these aliens. And what's interesting about her is she's not normal in that she has these five rings that do different things. They do healing, they create miracles, they have all kinds of powers that they do. And she goes back in, like, before Christ in time to live her life out and be with this family and kind of set the stage so that when it comes back to the 21st century, when she's born, she's set to give information and defeat the aliens and be able to continue life as we know it. And it it is a complicated plot, and it looks like Peter still isn't here to talk about it. But so I'll just give you a brief summary, and I won't spend the whole hour giving you like a book report because I know that's not exciting radio. But anyway, so Valerie Dunn has this elaborate plan to be able to come back and uh, uh, put together all of her rings and be able to defeat this planetary attack. So she brings back these books to the BC before thousands of years BC before she's born, and the books are from the future, and so they're indestructible. So she has these books with her when she comes back to the BC before Common Era timeline, and she also has these five rings that do these five things. Now, there's one ring, the fifth ring, the thumb ring, which is invincible. Like all of the other rings cannot defeat this one ring. Kind of like Lord of the Rings, but a little different. And so, as she's going through her timeline before the Common Era, she is uh, building her family, and she gave each one a ring, and she wrote a book on what the ring does and how to use it. And it is amazing how this comes together. So the book starts out where she's in modern time and she's a 4-year-old, and this guy attacks her and tries to kill her, and she's able to thwart him off. And it is fascinating how all of this takes place because this guy is a thief and actually has one of her rings. But it's very, very complicated. The whole plot of the book is that way. And it's one of the first nonfiction books we've ever done on the New Bridge radio show. And normally we choose books that kind of give you a little bit of helpful information, but this one is just for fun. It's just for fun if you're a science fiction fan. If you're looking for some good summer or fall reading, this is a great book to do that. And you can find the book on Amazon. It's called The Rings of Hessarian. You can find it on Amazon. Peter Harrett is the author. You can find the guest banner on the New Bridge Radio website, www.newbridgeradio.com. You can find Peter Harrett's picture there, as well as a picture of the book, and you can get to his site. And I definitely recommend the book and recommend you read it. So it only figures that Peter didn't show up today because today is one of those days where uh, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Like beginning at the very first day, the moment I started my job, and I work in addition to doing the radio job, I have what I call a muggle job. So I have a muggle job where I work in telecommunications. It's very sexy. But anyway, I was in my muggle job, and in telecommunications, there's one thing that all telecommunications people, whether they're doing support or whatever they do, sales, there's one thing that they fear more than anything, and that's having someone call and say, I got a question about my bill. And that is usually going to be a huge long telephone call, and it's going to be you going through their bill, which is my least favorite thing to do. in the entire world. People and their cell phone bills are terrible. And even I don't even like reading my own um, telephone bill. But anyway, that's the way this day started. So that was my first call. And I'm like, oh, and I got through it, explained the bill, and everybody was happy. And okay, I'm like, I'm through that. It's done. And then the very next call, is this Kevin? Is this Kevin? I got a question on my bill. So again, it was another one of those calls where it's a long, long time going through a telephone bill. And I was like, what is wrong with this? What is wrong with this day? And the second call was the person was a little more antagonistic. And I was like, ooh. And it reminded me of something uh, that I came across years and years ago. It's a quote by Buddha. And the Buddha said in a quote, the first victim of your anger is always yourself. And I always try to remember that when I'm dealing with other people on the telephone because you never really know what they've been through before they got to you. Like there are people who will call and be just terrible and terrible, and it's so easy to react to them and to kind of match their energy and be well, well, how dare you? But I always try to remember that the victim of your anger is always yourself. And my third call, I got an instant message from one of my coworkers. Oh, so and so is on the phone, and blah blah blah, and they want to know this and they want to know that. But anyway, it's so easy to misinterpret instant messages because it's just writing. There's nothing else that you have as far as what the person actually means or what they're actually saying. So it can be terrible. You can read it and be like, what? Like, what are they saying to me? So it can be very easy to kind of be a little quick tempered when you're reading something from a coworker, and it can be easy to go off. And I am guilty of it. I have at times said terrible things and said, oh, you know what? Why are you queuing me? And all kinds of things. But I always try to remember that saying from Buddha that the first victim of your anger is always yourself. And if you kind of take a step back before you write a message in reply, just let yourself have a moment and get rid of the anger that might be plaguing you, because as the minutes pass and you get through and start dealing with the situation, it's never as extreme as it seems to be. So it might be red hot and heavy, and you're like, oh, in the moment, I'm going to get you. But in the end, if you can hold off and let yourself feel whatever it is, the anger you're feeling, and you maybe even type the cue, but just don't send it, then it will help you a lot. Because in some ways, it will save you kind of the embarrassment of uh, writing something in to your coworkers that you don't want to write, which can get you into trouble. And while we're on that subject, if you're going to cuss your coworkers out, and this is terrible advice, but I'm willing to provide it. If you're going to cuss your coworkers out, don't do it in writing, do it over the phone. Everything you put in writing is submissible, so that's just a tip. And something you should remember. And it's something I definitely do myself. If I'm going to say something mean, I will call. That way, there's no record. Oh, I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about. But if it's in writing, they can just say, look. Anyway, so it doesn't look like Peter has shown up yet, so we can't ask any questions of our guest. And I was talking to I have a great producer by the name of Todd Bates. He is also the owner of the radio station WLTKDB. He does a great job, and he designed our logo, which we are enamored with. And just so you know, I'm wearing my WLTKDB shirt, which is quite envious. And I'm doing just a little plug for Todd because I think he did a great job designing the logo. And you can go to our station website and type in and go to the store, and you can buy merch on the WLTK.com website. Not only t-shirts like this one that I have, you can get hoodies, you can get mugs, you can get keychains, you can even get like, so when I was there, they even had spandex with the WLTKDB logo on them, and it was tastefully done. It's tasteful spandex on the site, so be sure to check that out. If nothing else, go to our merchandise site just so you can see it, because it's amazing. I don't know how you won't buy yourself a pair. So we have that, and that is great. We also have something coming up in October that we're very excited about on the WLTK DB station because we've never done it before. On October 30th, we are going to have a gallery reading, and you can buy tickets to this event and join us and ask questions of some of the psychics on WLTK-DB. Peter Obera will be there. Nicole is going to be there. Missy Hart will be there. Nicole Strickland will be there as well. And it's not something you would want to miss out on. If you have questions that you have been pondering now for months and months and months, why not take advantage of our virtual gallery reading and ask questions of our psychics? You will not regret it. In fact, there are people that would say, "Oh, oh, hello, Sherry. Sherry is one of the fans of the show. Thank you, thank you for watching and joining me on my guest list this evening." Yeah. So don't mark that on your calendars. If there are still tickets available, you can go to www.wltk.com and you can find more information there and even purchase your tickets. Hey, hello, Nicole. Thank you. I'm glad to see you there. Nicole does a great job on Afterlife Chronicles. She has guests. She is very at ease when she talks to people. And Nicole has the funniest laugh of anybody I've ever seen. And I just love listening to her on her show, Afterlife Chronicles. Anyway, so we are getting close to an actual real break on the New Bridge Radio Show, and we are this show we're going to actually have two. So we are going to have to step away for just a brief moment, and we will hear from some of our sponsors, and we will be right back on the New Bridge Radio Show.
Two intuitive books, one amazing author. Intuitive You. Psychic and Personal Development by Christina Bloom. We all have the ability to tune into our sixth sense, the realm of intuition. Whether your intuition presents as a gut feeling or full psychic ability, Intuitive You will help you to fully embrace how your intuition works. Let's not forget about Christina's newest book, Wisdom for the Age of Ascension, Channeled Messages from Divine Intelligence. Wisdom for the Age of Ascension is an updated and expanded second release of Christina's first book, The Contemplative Truth. Christina has expanded her reach to more light beings, enabling more information to be channeled to you, the reader. Wisdom for the Age of Ascension and Intuitive You by Christina Bloom. Get your copies today or visit moonbowpublications.com. That's moonbowpublications.com.
Welcome back to the New Bridge Radio Show. I am your host, Kevin Mackey, and we were supposed to be joined by science fiction author Peter Harrett, who wrote a fantastic book called The Rings of Hasaran. And unfortunately, something has held Peter up, or he hasn't been able to make it something came up. Who knows what could have happened at this point? All I know is he hasn't shown up, and so we are just continuing without him. And we are talking just a little bit about his brilliant book, which deals with time loops, science fiction, magic, crime, alchemy, and all of the things that a lot of us are interested in. It is a book that I found intriguing, and Peter has a really great writing style for his first book. The way he divides it up into time is brilliant. And as you're reading through the chapters, you'll find he does this perfect arc where it starts out kind of slow, and then it gets more intense and more intense and more intense. And then by it's one of those books why when you get to the chapter, you're like, oh, I've gotta read more. I gotta find out what happens. And then it's to a different time scene. So it's a completely different scene. You're like, well, dang it. I didn't want that to happen. And then you start reading that time scene, and the same thing happens. It starts getting a little bit, it starts out kind of slow, and then all of a sudden it starts building and building and building. And then by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, I got to find out what happens next. And by the time you're there, then you're on to another one. But it's brilliant how it was crafted that way. And for a first time writer, I was like, boy, this guy really hit it out of the ballpark with this book, because it really will grab you, and it will keep you for hours reading it. And I did have the opportunity to hear Peter speak about the book in another podcast and explain that the book took 2 years for him to write. And it was his first book, novel that he'd ever written. And when he started the story, he had just talked to his daughter about the story and told her the story. And the more he told it, the more he thought, well, maybe I should write this as a story. The more it started to evolve. And his daughter is Valerie. And so it could very well be that main character, is named after his daughter. But we won't know, will we? Because Peter didn't show up. But anyway, the book is fascinating. If you can find it online on Amazon.com, go ahead and check it out. It's The Rings of Hessarian. And the Hessarian is spelled Hesaurun, is Hessarian. It's kind of a science fiction name. And as most of you know who are familiar with the show and have read my bio, I'm a terrible, terrible, terrible speller and have had this spelling issue, but I'm also a writer. But I probably wouldn't be able to write anything if it weren't for spell check. But I started I became, maybe you're like me and you started out in grade school, and maybe you were a perfect, you were ambitious and thought you would get through school and you liked going to school. And then you had that one teacher that really for some reason didn't like you. Well, that happened to me. My one teacher was Mrs. K, and I won't say her full name or what grade I was in, because I have more people on my Facebook from my kindergarten class than I do my 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 high school class. But anyway, Mrs. K, they'll know who Mrs. K is. She wasn't my kindergarten teacher though. So anyway, I kind of didn't develop a good uh, spelling skills in that class because of my particular teacher, Mrs. K. And to this day, I still struggle with it. And getting through, but if you are a high schooler listening to this and you are in the same boat as me and have trouble spelling or have terrible penmanship, don't let that stop you from going to college, because you will still make it. It may take you a little bit longer to do all the writing and do all the stuff, but you'll make it, and it's well worth it. It's well worth it to finish your school, because education is a currency that you can spend in any economy, and that is true. And I have done the gamut of higher education. I have a bachelor of science in human resource management, which I thought would be ubiquitous and helpful. It wasn't. But don't let that discourage you either. Having a degree in HR is really almost as almost as useful as having a degree in sacred music, kind of. I have a friend who has a degree in sacred music. But anyway, um, uh, uh, I'm often shocked and surprised by the number of people who confessed to me later they had the same issues and same trepidation about spelling, especially in college. And it felt like it was mostly people who grew up in the 80s that ran into these spelling issues. Myself and a lot of my contemporaries all had the same issues with spelling and getting through things. And maybe it was just the time. Who knows? Who knows what it was? But there are things you can do to help you out in the spelling arena. There's several good books by Grammar Girl, and I have found her to be very, very helpful. Grammar Girl has a lot of good books, not only on spelling, but on grammar, and she has videos as well. If you are an aspiring writer and want to know more about grammar, but are afraid to ask people, like I was afraid to ask people, what does this mean? How do you spell this? She's a great resource, Grammar Girl. So find Grammar Girl on Amazon. You can find all kinds of books about spelling that might improve it just a bit. So part of my spelling issue is from that, but part of it is because I'm an adult over 50. And being an adult over 50 is interesting, especially in this time that we live in, because people in their 50s now are more technically savvy. They're more aware than their parents were. I was born in 68. So I am really one of the first kids to grow up that was a Sesame Street person. Sesame Street was created when I was a year old. And it was a great tool, a great learning tool. And it was also a great tool to change attention spans. And I feel like people my age had our attention spans changed because of the programming on Sesame Street. It was 30 seconds for this and 30 seconds for that, and then on to a new thing 30 seconds later. So if you are my age, or maybe even in your 40s, and you find yourself having a hard time paying attention, you might subscribe to my Sesame Street theory of how our attention span changed. And we were not able to pay close attention to things in the future. But that's not to say that Sesame Street is a bad thing, because it was fabulous. And it definitely taught us a lot of things, a lot of cool things. We all learned a lot from it. And I think it's a great show still. But anyway, it did change our we're the first generation, people over 50, that have been bombarded our entire lives by advertisements. So the Sesame Street was kind of a train the beginning, and then at being around advertising this whole time has really changed our attention span. It's not a problem that my parents have as profoundly as myself and my siblings. So if you have also made this kind of observation about your own self and your own life, why can't I pay attention? Why do I have such a hard time? It may be because of that. And I definitely had that. And going through college with spelling issues and a hard time reading, I didn't think I was ever going to make it. But I muddled through it. I actually graduated from college magna cum, which shocked me. It shocked everyone around me. Like, he's magna cum? How'd that happen? But hang in there, do it. Always find the resources you need, and you will be able to get through it. I didn't know anything about starting a podcast. Didn't have the will or desire to do it, and but I managed to do it. I managed to put it together and make it work. And we've done 77 episodes now. So if you're willing to just do a little bit, you'll be able to pull it off. Yeah. Anyway, so we were talking about our author who didn't show up, and it looks like I don't have a message that he has shown up, so it doesn't look like Peter is going to be a go for this hour. But so I'm just going to plug in one more time. He has a new book, The Rings of Hassarian, book one, and it's probably going to be a series of books. Now, I heard him say in an interview that when he started writing the book, and the story started taking off, he had 180,000 words written, which that is a lot of words. Now the book itself is 500 pages, so it's a big book. It's a big time commitment. So, but it's a fascinating story. So he started off, and he took the book to his publisher, and they were like, no, we can't have a we can't have a book this long. You're going to need to break this up into a series of books, rather than just this big thick tome that you've written and tried to give us. So he had enough, believe it or not, he had enough to create the first book, the Rings of Assyrian, and he had enough, believe it or not, to make three-quarters of the next book. So he has written, he got off to a really good start. And I myself have attempted writing a novel, and it is not easy. It isn't easy at all. It's a huge time commitment. And if you have poor attention span, it can be hard focusing and getting through the writing part. So the only bad part about writing is the writing part. So anyway, I am very pleased that Peter was able to put forth so much effort in writing his first book. So that is about all I'm going to say about our lovely absent guest, Peter, except I hope he is doing well. I hope he is fine and that everything is good. And I really enjoyed your book, Peter, if you watch this later, and I hope you do, because I did buy your book. Anyway, so um, uh, now we'll move on to a new topic. So uh, I I told Todd, he was like, "Well, do you want to have the show?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do want to have the show because I have." As if you've been a longtime subscriber to this podcast, you know that I have a certain amount of social anxiety that can show up and can make me a nervous person. And when people meet me, they're like, "Oh man, that guy." And so I can make other people nervous because I've always been kind of a geeky person. I was a geeky kid growing up. I was really small when I was young. I was really tiny, like a stick person, and really awkward. I was really easy to push down because I was very small, and they would shove me down. And I had a really, really high voice, which made me even more awkward because I was really, really small and I talked like Minnie Mouse. And when you're really small and talk like Minnie Mouse, people do beat you up for no other reason than, oh, look, I can beat this geeky kid up. So, that's where my social anxiety started to take root, was being just, a very small person that was easy to shove, move around, or trip, or, so uh, that's kind of what began the journey to social awkwardness. But then I moved a lot into different went to different schools, and that also just kind of destroys everything. And maybe you're like me as well. You're one of those people who went to different schools, and it's terrible. And if you are listening to this show and you're in school now and you are have just moved to a new school, just started the new year at a new school with new people, and you're feeling out of place, I'm one of your people because I know what that's like. It's terrible. It's one of the worst things in the world, especially those first few weeks of school where you're just like feeling awkward and terrible and you don't want to talk to anybody. And if you're one of those people, just know that I'm one of those people too. But you know what? I made it through and got through it, and you will too. And it always does get better as you are moving through your school career. By the time you get to college, you will have a better sense of yourself. And I definitely did. By the time I finished college, I wasn't quite as nervous and as quite as, full of angst as I was, in high school. because high school was terrible. Terrible for me. I went to three different high schools. And I didn't belong in any one of them. It was just a terrible, terrible time. But you know what is interesting? If you're in school and you're feeling pressure to go to college right away, don't feel that pressure either, because I waited 3 years before I went to college after high school, and I was in a position where I um, found a job where my company paid for my degree, so I graduated from college debt free. Didn't have any owe anything, and I was able to do all the coursework. I was able to go at night and weekends, and got my degree, and it turned out to be a really good thing. And that is something that a lot of young people have as an option. It doesn't have to be right out of high school like all of your friends. Like when I was a senior, all of my friends were getting scholarships and they were going and they were ready, and I was not. So don't worry about it. And also don't worry about going to a trade school either, because I went to Le Cordon Bleu cooking school later in life. And if you've ever thought about doing something like that, about going to culinary school, just know that it is huge. It's huge fun. It is huge, huge fun. I went to culinary school for a year at Le Cordon Bleu, and it, it, I went with I had a huge class. Like there were 36 people in my class. It was huge. And it was interesting going to culinary school with that many people, because it teaches you so much. Oh, thank you, Nicole. Thank you. She said I was an inspiration. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate you. I went to culinary school with 36 people. And there were times where we would all be cooking. And when you're with 36 other people on gas grills and cooking something on a gas burner that are all black and all of your pots look the same, you can kind of not know what pot you're cooking in. And not only was there that, when you have such a large class, there were a lot, believe it or not, there were a lot of culinary students, and this happened daily. And there were a lot of culinary students that got their towels or their uniform in the flame of the gas stoves. Every day, somebody got a towel on fire every day. And so, yeah, when it's big and crowded like that, it always happens. So anyway, if you're thinking about doing that, definitely do, because it's fun. Even if you're not young. So I went to culinary school in my 40s. I was like, I had just been laid off. I didn't have anything else to do, and I didn't really want to start a new job. And I was like, well, I'm gonna. And they had a program for people, who were older, like me. They had this program where they could retrain for another career, and I took advantage of it after being laid off. I'm like, oh, I'll do it. I'll go to culinary school and I'll become a chef. But that didn't work out because somehow I landed back in the tech industry. So, but anyway, don't be afraid to do it because it's so much fun. Just so much fun. If you are middle aged like me and you feel like you've never found your purpose, uh, education, and you feel like you've wasted so much time in education, I too am your person. Because I have done a lot. I went to culinary school. I went to paralegal school, and none of that really worked out too good. But I've always appreciated those lessons that I learned in all of those classes and gaining those skills that I gained in those skills. I got to work with. I got to do an internship in culinary school with a chef by the name of Holly Smith. Holly Smith has the Juanita Cafe, and it's a beautiful restaurant. It's amazingly beautiful. It's in Kirkland, Washington. And Holly Smith, my mentor and the chef I interned with, won Iron Chef on the Food Network channel. she competed against Iron Chef Kat Cora. And if you ever watch that show, Kat Cora is really, really difficult to beat. And Holly Smith beat her and ended up winning. And so I was thrilled to be able to do my externship at her restaurant. And she made amazing Northern Italian food. And she was just such an amazing person. There is something so, and this kind of segues into something else, but it, I don't know if you've ever worked in a kitchen before, but I've done it since I was a teenager. There's something really interesting that happens in a kitchen that is beyond comprehension. But there's something that happens when it's suddenly very busy and everybody is doing their work and doing their job, and it's crazy busy. Everybody is working hard. Everything is doing their best to put things together, and it's bam, 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 bam. This out, this out, this out, this out. And something happens where it's just something happens to the communication where it's just smooth. It's just like, it's just an amazing feeling when you're part of a group effort that just becomes like almost like a musical in a way, or musicians playing music. It's always an amazing thing, and it's great to find coworkers if you have to work that can share that. And Nicole Strickland is asking, what is your favorite cuisine to cook? And my favorite cuisine to cook would probably shock you, but my favorite cuisine to cook is definitely roast chicken. And roast chicken, what? But when I went to culinary school, that was one of the things we had to learn how to do to perfectly. And it's something that you're never perfect at, but you always try to perfect it. And so it's just it was probably one of the first things we learned in culinary school, besides our mother sauces, how to cook chicken, roast a chicken. And so it's one of those things we're always trying to perfect. But you know something, Nicole, the one thing that was terribly hard for me in culinary school that I failed at every single time I ever attempted it was mayonnaise. Mayonnaise is really hard to make. And it frustrated me to no end until I found out in that movie, Julia, the story about Julia Childs. Julia Childs could not make mayonnaise either. Like, she failed at making mayonnaise. So it made me feel much better. And I was like, I'm going to just buy my mayonnaise from now on. But anyway, well, it looks like we are going to have to go to another break. Boy, the time is flying by, right? Like, you probably learned more than you ever thought. So we are going to hear from my sponsors, and we will be right back after these messages on the New Bridge Radio Show.
Sunday, October 24th, the 2021 Statler City Psychic Fair in Buffalo, New York. Come out and meet psychic medium and host of School Through Spirit, Diet Renee, and spirit medium and host of the Ghost Finders, Rob Thompson. Diet Renee is a renowned psychic medium, medical intuitive, and master teacher of psychic mediumship development. Hailing from Wisconsin, Diet trained under world-renowned psychic Lisa Williams. Spirit medium Rob Thompson is one of Diet's mediumship development students. He is the host and executive producer of America's longest-running indie paranormal TV show, The Ghost Finders, on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and Roku. He has made guest appearances on other shows including Discovery Channel's Paranormal 911 and A Haunting, and teaches paranormal research at the Los Angeles City College. Come and meet these two superb mediums together on stage for live gallery readings. Remember, Sunday, October 24th, the 2021 Statler City Psychic Fair. Get your tickets now at StatlerCity.com. That's StatlerCity.com. Doors open at 1, close at 6. Gallery readings, tarot cards, and more. Statler City Psychic Fair. Tickets at StatlerCity.com.
Welcome back to the New Bridge Radio Show on WLTKDB Let's Talk. I am your host, Kevin Mackey, and we're having an unusual show if you're just joining us. Our guest, Peter Harrett, author Peter Harrett, science fiction author, was a no-show today. And we were all prepared, or I was all prepared to talk about his fantastic book, The Rings of Hyserian. But for whatever reason, Peter couldn't make it. And I was at first thought I might cancel the show if he didn't show, but I went ahead and decided, I'll just talk about the book and we'll just play it by ear and get through the hour. We'll mention the book and what I thought about it, because I think it's a great book and one worth mentioning. And it is science fiction. We don't do a lot of science fiction books on the New Bridge Radio Show. Normally it's books that tell us how to connect with what's next, but I guess sometimes we just need to have a little fun. And this is a fun book. If you're looking for something to read this fall, it's a great science fiction book that will have you turning the pages over and over in every single chapter. You won't regret it. And that's The Rings of Hyserian by our absent guest, Peter Harrett, a fellow Washingtonian. He lives in Arlington, which is just north of me. It's just north. It's by the reservation. It's a beautiful town. So anyway, you can check that out on Amazon. You can find him under the book's name, or you can find it under Peter Harrett. And his second book is the second part to the Rings of Hyserian is coming out. So you might want to check it out and get ready for that book. So it was exciting, an exciting book to read. Now, before we went to break, we were talking about food, and food is a subject that everybody has an interest in, especially with people who have gone to culinary school. And after I went to culinary school, we didn't get invited anywhere for dinner. Like nobody wanted to cook. Like, nobody wanted to invite Paul and I out to dinner because I went to culinary school and they felt like they were being judged. But something else that happened is I went back to work before culinary school ended, and at work we had a potluck. So we had we had this big potluck, and it's everybody on the graveyard shift. We're doing potluck, and we were breaking for the big potluck that we all had, and I brought some ribs. But everybody was watching me, and they had known I had gone to culinary school because sometimes I would be a mess when I come into work, but so they knew about me, and they were all hesitant, and they were waiting for me to give them feedback on what they made. I'm like, oh, it's delicious, it's delicious, it's delicious, and people don't invite us anymore because they're afraid. But I would be fine with hamburger helper. That's what I ate growing up. So yeah, people feel like they have to put on a show, and it's like no. And Paul thinks that's funny. He's like, he'll basically eat anything. But anyway, I was talking about how great it is to work in an environment where everybody is cooperative and everybody's working great. And as someone my age, I always appreciate it, and maybe you appreciate this as well. When you go into some place, it doesn't even have to be a restaurant, but you go into a business and there's somebody there who cares, who makes you feel important and does their job with a certain degree of joy. I've always aspire to be someone that does that. And, I've been working a long, long, long time, and I've done a lot of terrible, terrible, terrible jobs. But I've always aspired, no matter where I was working, to always do my best and always be positive, always be somebody that comes in and has a good attitude because it makes things so much easier. And there's a presupposition in NLP, the person or the element with the most flexibility in a system will have the most influence. And that is true. When you are somebody who puts forth that kind of effort to go in and be the best that you can be and be cooperative and co create whatever it is you're doing, you do end up with the most influence. And that is probably the most important life lesson I ever learned, about being flexible and being agreeable, because you never know what people are going through. Like some of the coworkers you can't stand, you just never know what's happening in their own personal life. And you could be the one source of light that is in this person's life. If you're the one that's agreeable and that is in a good mood, and you're the one that is making things move along, you just never know what that is. And I worked for AT&T for a number of years, and we were laid off. We were laid off. So, but the thing about it that about working for that company was, the end was very strange, because we kept getting notice. Oh well, we're going to lay you off in 2 months, and then 2 months would come and we weren't laid off. And then another couple months would go by and they'd say, oh well, we're not going to lay you off yet, but we will lay you off. So, and it became such a everybody expected it. Like everybody's like, okay, well, just lay us off then. But it kept being dragged out. It dragged down, believe it or not, for 2 years. 2 years. This kept dragging on and on and on, throughout that whole experience. And a lot of people, as you may know, were discouraged. It's terrible to work in that kind of, that were very discouraged, and I couldn't blame them for being reactive, highly reactive in their job. Like, I don't care, we're getting laid off, was kind of what they thought. But I still went in, still did it, and when everything ended and people came back, years later, after all of this went down, people were like, you know what? I really appreciated you coming in and being nice and being, friendly and smiling. And that helped a lot. That helped a lot going through that hard time. And it really is difficult, being in that kind of situation. And if you are in that situation, I really feel for you, because it is difficult and it's really hard to move on when you're in that kind of position where things are going to end. You don't really want to look for another job, and it can be miserable. And if you are in that situation, I'm just going to give you a little piece of advice. You will be okay. You will be okay. You will land on your feet. You will be fine, because things will change and it will be better. Like usually, and I sometimes hate it when people say, "Well, it'll be better," and you don't want to. You're like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. But it really will be better. I have been laid off a number of times in my life, and it always turned out better. It always turned out better. But when if you're facing this and it's going to happen to you, don't look for work right away. Just take a few days, a week or so, to let yourself get through the trauma of being laid off, because it's terrible. It's terrible. It's a traumatic thing to do. You have a lot of questions and there's uncertainty, and it's terrible. So for that first week, do nothing. Well, This has been a test in my ability to do do an impromptu show, and I hope I did okay. You'll have to let me know at the Newbridge Radio Show at gmail.com. And it looks like that's the end for us. Next week, we are having a great guest, Amy Yip, and she is a transformation coach, and she is amazing. She's going to be an amazing guest on the Newbridge Radio Show. Peter, if you're there, I missed you, but hopefully you're doing well. All right, that's going to do it for us. And that's the end of the New Bridge Radio Show. Have a great week and have a great rest of the night.